Hello, it's certainly wonderful to be back and in a position to make a new video. January and the first half of February, I believe Portugal had record amount of rainfall and it did cause some mudslides. Fortunately not directly behind these buildings where I live, but fairly close by. What was nice was Monchique Social Services phoned me up one day and said, we're just checking on anybody who lives on their own to make sure that they're okay. Is there anything you need? Which was rather lovely. That was nice to know that there is some support even from a government source. As you probably know, I rely pretty much entirely on solar panel, and this last week or so has been nothing but cloud. But today it's opened up to mostly blue skies and it's actually rather warm. But I'm not going to complain about that, and it's not windy, so that's beautiful. So what I wanted to talk about in this video is the often quoted saying, as above, so below, and as within, so without, and give a slightly different perspective on this. I'm often asked, where do I get my information? Well, the as above would be what are called spiritual downloads. That happens often when you hand over to your higher self and you admit to yourself that you can't think your way out of something, you can't solve something, but your higher self will find the answers for you. Refer back to previous videos where I've talked about that. So the as above, the equivalent that the so below, that I would suggest, hopefully you can see this, I can't see the screen, but I've got loads of these decking boards and I'm bringing out the wood grain, and it is what is ingrained in this wood. The sanding process is very therapeutic. It's almost like an active meditation, because you're physically doing something, but you can just let your mind allow those mind pictures to come through. We'll come back to that in a minute, and what was revealed, what is ingrained in these timbers. And in a way, what is also being reflected here is I am giving these timbers a new lease of life. I'm bringing them back to life, you could say, because they are parts of a framework which will create a new structure, which will provide some very much welcome shades when we get into the summer. And also I'm planning to hold a meetup of archaics at this location, actually host it. So I've got something to aim for, a direction to go, and it's an example of co-creating. So as within, so without. Well, an example of that would be as within the history books and the history we're told. And one of the things that comes out, I don't know how many people know of this, I'm sure you've all heard of the East India Tea Company. But what is lesser known is the West India Tea Company. And one of the things they were involved in was taking immigrants to the new world, what became the United States and Canada. And for their passage, there was a thing called indentured servitude. So to pay for their journey and them being put on a plantation, and then obviously the West India Tea Company would bring back various things to England, which sounds a wonderful idea, but it went horribly wrong and was very open to abuse, in that the West India Tea Company didn't actually check on the well-being of these indentured servants. So that's a within the history. The so without is the external world today. You still have indentured servitude, but it's slightly more hidden. Just think of all those people that go to university and run up these massive student loans and the exorbitant interest rates, so they become debt slaves. But most people won't have that perception and won't realise they are a debt slave. It keeps them as a good, obedient worker because they've got to pay for their rent, they've got to pay for their mortgage, and so on. Another example of this was something in the 19th century in particular, and even into the 20th century, and certainly in England, every county had at least one, some even with railway stations, and some of these buildings were sort of palatial in their size. I'm talking, of course, about asylums. But there are no asylums today to speak of, and from the perspective of the control system, you've got to invest funding into the upkeep of the building and paying the staff. So what if there was a way of doing away with that and still having asylums? Well, the so without very much exists today. It just requires a little bit of lateral thinking, and this is what has come out from the wood grain. So the collective, those that will focus on the clown show world, all these rumours of wars and what this politician has said and what that celebrity has said or done, and the whole issue of such things as disappearing children and such like, all designed to keep you in a fear state. And do you know it to really be true? And more importantly, how does that affect your individual personal world? It is to keep you in that fear state, in that negative vibration, because that energy is being harvested and it is actually working against you. So the asylums of today are very much linked with all these media stories that are always doom and gloom. And it verifies this idea that we bring things upon ourselves. So if you're one of these people that is glued to the television and faithfully watching the 6 o'clock news every night and saying to those around you, shush, shush, I'm trying to watch this, and you're really focusing it into it, it is very much a case of where the focus goes, the energy will flow. And what in fact you create is a self-imposed asylum upon yourself. You don't need psychiatric nurses. You don't need these massive buildings. People put themselves in these situations. And that is very much evident. If you're an observer of this, you'll get people going out and protesting, or acts of vandalism, or attacking other people verbally and physically because they have a difference of an opinion. I would suggest that is absolute madness. So there's your asylum of today in the external world. If the chains are invisible, most people won't see it. So indentured servitude and the asylums of today follow exactly the same pattern. And of course, if you dare to suggest a very different perspective on history and how this world really is, they will see you as mad. But their behaviour shows that it is they that are mad. They're uptight, they're stressed out, the expression is losing their shit, having a meltdown. Is that not craziness? Because what can any of us do as an individual to change the outer world? I would suggest the best way to do that is lead by example, go your own way, do your own thing, become a co-creator. It's exactly what I've done here. I live a life where I don't have stress like that. I don't watch any of the news, therefore I don't get anything even come through on YouTube to try and entice me back into watching it. So I have this very beautiful, calm world, but it does obviously come with a different set of challenges, like where is the funding going to come from? There is a GoFundMe, which is linked into the description, but with January and February and that dreadful weather and this what can be very treacherous earth clay soil, I have to consider my health and what I can do. And after having 3 mild strokes in December, I really do have to listen to the body and adapt to the changing situation. But I can still be a co-creator. I can bring the timbers back to life. I'm creating this sanctuary for cats. We are a family of the living. I live in the land of the living. I don't focus on what was and what they should be doing in regard to politicians and such like. And because let's face it, all you're ever going to get is concessions, and that is exactly what they are. If you break the word down, they are a con. And a con is also a bringing together. It's bringing together people to be in a fear state. And it is a cess and upon the mind's eye. It's muddying the mind's eye in the same way that religion, particularly the Christian religion, will have Ash Wednesday, where they smudge bits of soot over where the mind's eye would be. It's all a ritual to keep you blind and keep you in that fear state. But it doesn't have to be like that, does it? You can create a world around you. You can become a co-creator. You can have a far more conducive experience in this reality. And this is all come from this wood grain, just doing this sanding, and it's being just like a meditation, bringing out the wood grain, bringing out the story that is contained in that wood grain. It is the natural internet, the natural web through trees, through their root system, everywhere around the earth. They communicate with each other. I've spoken about this before, about maybe 19 months ago on my old channel, how the wood grain is ingrained with stories, and it will impart that when you bring those timbers back to life and you bring out the magnificence of that grain. So that's where some of the information comes. It can also be inspired from things I hear on the radio. It can be inspired from listening to other YouTube channels. There are very few I actually listen to these days, because I also have, at the moment, 6 cats to look after, and settling them in, making them feel loved and wanted. And they've all settled in. On the whole, they do get on. They tolerate each other, if nothing else. They can be around each other. We get the odd occasional disagreement where they hiss and growl, but that is getting less and less and less. And cat purring is another wonderful thing. If you've got particularly cardiac problems, or perceived problems is probably the more accurate word, the purring is a vibration which will really help. So as much as anything else, it's a reciprocal thing. I'm doing what I can to save a lot of cats from being homeless and basically becoming walking skeletons, left to fend for themselves in what has been awful weather in recent months. But spring does now seem to be here, and I envisage eventually having about maybe 20 cats here as permanent residents, but I'm also building up a network of being able to rehome some of the cats, because there has to be limits. You have to set boundaries with everything. It may be that there may be some cats come here that really don't get on with the other cats, and I have to think of the harmony of the majority of the cats, because otherwise it's going to do sort of damage and set them back, so they go back into this fear state and hide under the bed and growl at each other, and we don't really want to go that way. So we unpluck that seed because we're not visioning that. We're visioning a happy purring community. So I hope that that has given you a different perspective on the as above, so below. And I would recommend do a bit of sanding of wood. It is very therapeutic. It is a kind of meditation, and it is an absolute pleasure to see this wood grain coming out, bringing these timbers back to life and giving them a new lease of life. So the next video on this channel, I'm going to give further validation to what Archaic's channel has shown repeatedly from a different perspective. And this video and future videos are very much leading towards answering the question, hello Demiana, of why are there so few geniuses in the world today? Why is it in the 19th century you have a prolific number of engineers, of chemists, of artists and such like that inspire and come up with solutions to help humanity? But where are they today? It's like everything else, it comes down to terms and conditions. So that is the trajectory of the videos that are going to be coming on this channel. And some of them will have to be in Archaic's Underground only, because the nature of what I'm going to be saying is probably going to upset the algorithms of YouTube, shall we say. But I feel things need to be said and things need to be explained. So we find solutions, we find ways around these things. I would seriously recommend and urge you to join Archaic's Underground. You won't get the clickiness and the falsity that you'll get on such things as Facebook. You'll be in contact with like-minded souls. Archaic's Underground is not all about Jason Brashears, which some of you may think it is. It is a place for anybody who is an errant to share their knowledge, share their information, to share their art, to share their pets, and much, much more. And it is growing, and it is a beautiful place to hang out. Because of the weather and the lack of solar power, I've not been as active in there as I would like to be. But I have achieved something thanks to those in Archaic's Underground that have looked at the things I have posted, and that is to get me to the underground master level from the things I've posted. So a big thank you to all those that have listened to what I've said and have well, hopefully it's planted a few seeds for you to see things with a new perspective, in the same way as looking at indentured servitude, and to come to that realization that in this reality, when you're given concessions by any government, it is not for your benefit. A perfect example of this will be to give people 4 weeks annual holiday a year, because they then work towards saving money or getting in debt to pay for a holiday. It keeps them obedient for the other 48 weeks of the year. And of course, to keep everybody in line, the bread and circus for the masses, you work them for 5 days and they are weakened with the weekend. Unless, of course, you do weird shifts and things, and then you'll have different days off, which can be an advantage, can be a disadvantage, depending on what sort of things interest you and what things you like to do. But see how the system is absolutely brilliant at playing humanity. And it also works on a theme of divide and conquer. So you'll always get some that will lean to a particular political view or a particular religious view, and they're right and everybody else is wrong, and it sets one group of people up against another. It's no different with sports events. But consider this as an example externally of the absolute madness in the world. If there are people, not just children, if there are people in general just going missing, disappearing, why aren't everybody else getting upset and getting outraged by this and doing something about it? And yet, if it's their sports team that loses a game, look at their behaviour then, how they get so enraged over something so superficial, but the things that matter, which involves life. Where is that same passion? Where is that same outrage? But of course, a lot of it is being fed through these media stories. There is nothing, as Jason of Archaics has said very recently, that isn't put out on the internet for a reason. And most of it is to keep you in that negative vibration, to keep you in that fight or flight mode. So you haven't got time to think. You haven't got time to do what I call the unthinkable, to go into like a meditative state, to hand over to your higher self, to let it just come to you. Being a king, you do not go chasing, you let things come to you. So start acting like a king. Recognize who you truly are. When you know who you are, you know not only who you are, you know why you are, you know where you are, and you know what you are. It also answers the how and the why as well from that. So we'll leave that there, and I have to admit at the moment, as you can see, I'm terribly worried about it. I am in a sort of a critical point financially, but we just put into practice what we always do. We vision the outcome we wish for, not what we want, what we wish for. Because if you say, I want, the subconscious knows that feeling and will give you more of that feeling of want. But you see it through to the end. You take active steps in the direction you wish to go. So for me, it is back to doing the co-creating, bringing this timber back to life and creating a structure, building back better. And it will provide welcome shade. It will provide a community seating area. It will provide somewhere for the cats with a bit of shade and many other functions. It will be a multifunctional structure of about, I suppose it's about 6 foot by 8 foot and about 6.5 foot tall, or it will be once I've built the frame. So that's what I should be getting on with, but there will be another video soon where I will give you something that further validates what Archaics is showing from a perspective that I can come from, something that I can bring to the table to further validate what is being said there is true. Now, I invite you to join Archaics Underground. You can have a 7-day free trial, but then it's only going to cost you $5.52 a month. It is a wonderful thing to invest in, and it will only help you enrich your lives further. I cannot recommend that enough. So with that, as I always say, unconditional love to you all.